Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Now this one's a little bit different. Apologies, no sim racing content, but I wanted to make this video whilst I had the opportunity. So I've been running a 1080 Ti for a couple of years now, purposely skipped the 20 series, and I was waiting for a 3080. A local computer shop rang me up and said, Dave, we don't have any 3080s in, you're top of the list or near the top of the list, but we do have 3090s in. Do you want one? Well, I thought about it overnight, and the next day I went out and bought this. So this is the MSI Ventus 3X overclock edition of the 3090, and I thought it'd be a good chance to do some benchmarks on the two sims that I use the most. Now the first one is iRacing. So for the benchmarks here, I had two replays recorded. One was the start of an IMSA race at Interlagos, and the other one was a worst case scenario 60-car AI multi-class race at Barcelona. Now just for context, I'll give you the specs for my system. So the CPU is an i7 9700K running at 5 GHz. I've got 32 gig of Corsa Vengeance RAM running at 3200 MHz. For the benchmarks, I use the 1080 Ti and the 3090, neither of which have been overclocked. So I've tried to keep it as simple as possible. I haven't put any graphs on screen. I've just given you the resolution, how the 1080 Ti did, and how the 3090 did. I've also included a couple of other benchmarks, iRacing, ACC, Heaven and Valley. So let's get on with it. So the first benchmark is here at Interlagos for an IMSA race. Now, I jumped in an IMSA race. I didn't drive it, but I recorded, I think, the first 4 laps or so. I'll put the graphics settings on screen now. These are the settings that I used for every benchmark. The only thing that changed is the screen resolution. Now, for this benchmark, I recorded the parade lap and the first flying lap. So it encompasses a little bit of everything. Now, graphs are all well and good, but I find them really hard to follow. If somebody puts a graph up with God knows how many different resolutions and variations, I find it hard to follow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the resolution, how the 1080 Ti scored, and how the 3090 Ti scored. Then we'll move on to the next. So let's start with the resolution 1920 by 1080. Lots of people will be playing on this resolution. The 1080 Ti scored an average frames per second of 96.0. And the 3090 scored 95.0. Can you believe that? 1 frames per second less than the 1080 Ti. So on to the next resolution now, which is 2560 by 1440. The 1080 Ti managed 95.1 frames per second on average, and the 3090 managed 94.1. On to the ultra-wide triple 1440, so resolution 7680 by 1440. The 1080 Ti managed an average frame rate of 34.8, and the 3090 managed an average frame rate of 60.0. Okay, so same rules apply. The Barcelona test, this was an AI race of 60 cars, max detail as you saw at the start of the video, starting right at the back. So the 1080 Ti managed an average frame rate of 56.3 at 1920 by 1080, and the 3090 scored 55.9. So on to the next resolution of 2560 by 1440. The 1080 Ti scored an average frame rate of 56.0, and the 3090 scored 55.7. So on to the next resolution, which is 7680 by 1440. So the 1080 Ti managed an average frame rate of 34.8, and the 3090 managed an average frame rate of 38.2. So then we moved on to Assetto Corsa Competizione, where the results a little bit better. So this was on the Epic preset. Same story as earlier on. We'll do 1920 by 1080 first. So the 1080 Ti got an average frame rate of 91.2, and similarly at low resolution the 3090 was worse with 88.8. So then on to 2560 by 1440. So the 1080 Ti managed an average frame rate of 83.2, and the 3090 managed an average frame rate of 88.2. So lastly on to the triples. So it's 7860 by 1440. The 1080 Ti managed an average frame rate of 32.7, but the 3090 managed an average frame rate of 63.0. So on to the Heaven benchmark now. So the 1080 Ti scored 2187, and the maximum frames recorded was 178.7. Now the 3090 scored 3736 with the maximum frames recorded of 303.4. So lastly on to the Valley benchmark. So the 1080 Ti managed a score of 3974, maximum frames recorded 194.2. The 3090 scored 6330 with maximum frames recorded of 281. So there we go. Not really surprising, the iRacing results. That title is so CPU dependent. So if you are thinking of upgrading your graphics card and you're on a similar spec PC to me, then you'll probably get better frames per second gains by upgrading your CPU. The other titles, Assetto Corsa Competizione and the two other benchmarks, Valley and Heaven, they rely more on the GPU, so those gains were much bigger. I think on ACC, on triple 1440s, they were my biggest gains, where it's something like 85% performance increase on those, and similar kind of results with the other two, to be honest. So on iRacing, old game engine, it's never going to do very well with a GPU upgrade, although things do look a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer somehow. On another note, the rendering time of videos on Adobe Premiere Pro has massively gone down with the 3090, and also scrubbing left to right on videos, where before with the 1080 Ti it was a little bit stuttery and jerky. Now it's as smooth as silk, so it will benefit me massively on that side of things in post-production. But let me know what you think of this video. Are you thinking of getting a 3080, 3090? What title are you going to be playing? Hopefully this might sway you one way or the other. If you just play iRacing, then save your money and buy something else. There we go. Cheers for watching. See you later. Ta.